I'm back. We getting back into our book. Hold on, let me make sure this all the way up. Oh. We getting back into our book, the Trilateral Commission. Matter of fact, let me make sure that y'all can hear me. Let me log in on my other phone. Let me log in on my other phone. Okay, you can hear me. All right. So now we on Trilateral Commission. We on the East-West relations. Rehabilitating the dropouts. The corporate one world economy must also include the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, and China. A one world dictatorship is coming, it's on its way. Trilateralists want to see these regions they call dropouts return to the school of Western capitalism, at least for training in how to conduct international relations, if not domestic affairs as well. U.S. recognition of the People's Republic of China in 1979, 30 years after its establishment, removed a roadblock to trilateral relations with China and Japan's friendship treaty with Russia. Recent business deals offer a glimpse of the enormous economic bonanza global corporations see in China's drive to modernize. China is not to be perceived as particularly threatening to the West so long as it remains on unfriendly terms with the USSR, with Russia. Well, we see that has changed because this book was written in 1980. That's definitely has changed. It is assumed that China will be a regional power, not a world power, at least through the 1980s. China and Russia are now world powers. So they got this wrong. They are both world powers. The 1978 report, an overview of the East-West relations, states the present degree of Sino-Soviet hostility tends to benefit the West, and the West should help to ensure that the present situation continues to be worthwhile to China. In particular, it is clearly in the interest of the West to grant China favorable conditions in economic relations. And then we got a footnote. China has been granted most favored nation trade status, which the USSR, which Russia has long been denied. The most favored national principle stipulated that any trading concessions between any two countries must be granted on equal basis to all countries which are a part of the most favored nation trading agreement. That's why China got access to all our stuff. China is the number one trading partner now. So this all was established in 1979 to prevent China being so friendly with Russia. Well, we see that didn't work out well because they are allies. The question for trilateralism is how best to play the so-called China card in continuing East-West conflict between the United States and Russia. As trilateralists see it, the East-West conflict combines the feature of power competition between the two superpowers of our time and of an ideological conflict between rival political, economic, and social systems based on fundamentally different values. Trilateralists say to Russia, you can't beat the U.S. They say that to this day. Hey, Coco. Especially in economic and ideological warfare. So why not join in? The hope is that Russia will join the community of developed nations in defending the global interests of industrialized rich countries against those of the third world. Trilateralists uphold the principles of both Decadent and deterrence. Within the Trilateral Commission, there is a disagreement over how warm should the initiative a decadent and how power must be nuclear and conventional deterrence, and how much to link progress in one area to progress in the other. The 1977 Trilateral Report, collaboration with communist countries in managing global problems, is optimistic about the prospect of widening cooperation with Russia. Well, that ain't in effect now. We beefed out with Russia right now. And China while winding down the arms race. It explores opportunities for cooperative management on international problems, food, energy, the ocean, space, weather, earthquake warning, development aid, trade policy, non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. In contrast, the 1978 Trilateral Report airs the views of the hard line. It stresses the conflictual relationship between Russia and the West, arguing that the decade is not the path to ending Soviet US rivalry, but represent necessary and useful efforts to limit the forms and range, the risks and burdens of continuing conflict by negotiation and partial cooperation. This report urges that the West make a concerted effort to shape Russia and China while containing Soviet economic and military power. All this is planned. A stable world order. This all about the new world order that's coming. It's here, baby. A stable world order is not a realistic objective for the West in a fundamentally unstable world. The only kind of peaceful world order that we can realistically envision is one of maximal flexibility for peaceful change. As a basic guideline for its long-term relationship with communist powers, the West should seek to influence the natural process of change worldwide in a direction that is favorable to its fundamental values. This does not mean seeking a breakdown of communist regimes, but rather given the difficult economic and political choices which keep facing them, particularly at a time of impending generation change in the Soviet Union. Russia seeks to influence the kind of choices that are possible and necessary within their own structure. Through negotiations in the framework of a decadent or limitation of arrangements and of international violence on terms of economic cooperation and communication across frontiers. The West can shape the alternatives facing its negotiating power or negotiating partners in such a way as to make some choices more rewarding to them than others. Fortune describes this risk of infection in an article about Russia. An even-handed policy toward Russia and China is in the trilateral's best trading interest, but pressure for a hard-handed approach to Russia has intensified in 78 and 80. A centerpiece of uneven approach to China and Russia's growing U.S. military collaboration with Chinese against a perceived Russia threat. Pakistan boarding Afghanistan, Thailand boarding Cambodia, a U.S. green light for the Chinese invasion of Vietnam in early 1979. U.S. leaders continue to see the world divided into Soviet and U.S. dominated spheres of influence, while some trilateralists like former UN Ambassador Andrew Young, Black Boule, gatekeeper for the Illuminati, oppose this view. Most insist upon seeing all natural liberation forces as Russia pawns. The West continues to raise the specter of the Soviet bear whenever it feels like the U.S. Western sphere of influence is threatened. Zaire, Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia, Nicaragua, and Iran. Nonetheless, trilateralists are confident that they can win the ideological and economic competition with Russia. They believe that Russia economy is declining and will reach a crisis state in the 80s. 50 years later, Russia is just fine. Most importantly, they believe that any country, whatever its economic system, will want Western products and technology. Both Young and Berninsky are vigorous proponents of this view. And that is further from the truth. They do not want our shit, especially our food. We the only country that kill its own people with the food. A recurring theme in business literature is that the trading with the West, the elites of other countries, will come to think like the West and act to shape their countries into the West image. Wow. Wow. The meaning of decadent for trilateralism is necessary contradictory. The aim is to provide maximum flexibility for peaceful change, favorable to Western capitalism. This means that moves will be made to relate more predictably and profitably with the Soviet Union and China. At the same time, the U.S. will continue to press the arms race, maximizing the forms, range, and risk of nuclear annihilation. And they still talk about the same thing to this day. Managing Western democracy. How much time I did? Okay. Trilateralists are not only concerned with managing international events, because everything is planned. They are determined to manage North American, West European, and Japanese democracy, fitting these societies either more closely to the needs of global capitalism. During the 1960s and 70s, ruling elites in the United States and throughout the West were challenged with militant protests from a wide section of public workers, Native Americans, blacks, women, poor people, students, Chicanos, Asian Americans, gays, environmentalists. See how this long this agenda been? Wow. The anti-war movement shook the bipartisan foreign policy consensus, which was grounded in Cold War and U.S. supremacy. Pressure mounted for more equitable, democratic, political, economic, and social system. Oh, I almost have missed that asterisk. Protest was nonviolent and violent, organized and spontaneous, short-lived and enduring. Hundreds of thousands of people marched on Washington. A wave of riots hit major cities and universities were shut down. The ruling class response was often brutal. Protesters were beaten and jailed. Leaders were murdered. Students, white and black, were shot down at Kent State, and Jackson State, that's the 60s. Police brutality was widespread, sure was, so these immigrants ain't feeling nothing what happened in the 60s, especially in minority communities. The FBI escalated its counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, sure did, against black, Native American, and Puerto Rican liberation struggles, the New Left, the anti-war movement, and the women's movement. Let me see what this footnote says. Oh, I ain't got to read that. The CIA carried out a covert action campaign within the U.S. and abroad against U.S. citizens assumed to be involved in anti-war activity known as Operation MH Chaos. MH standing for Matters Related to Internal U.S. Security and Chaos, signifying its goal of infiltrating and destroying anti-war groups. God damn. You can't make this shit up. You cannot make this up. This book written in 1980. I got to read that shit again. The CIA carried out covert action campaign within the U.S. abroad against U.S. citizens. Ain't nothing new under the sun. Assumed to be involved in anti-war activity known as Operation MH Chaos. MH standing for Matters Related to Internal U.S. Security and Chaos, signifying its goal of infiltrating and destroying anti-war groups. You can't make this shit. Oh my God, you can't make it up. In 1975, the Trilateral Commission released its book-length study, The Crisis of Democracy, report on the governability of democracy to the Trilateral Commission. Damn, that was by Noam Chomsky. Why? Oh, he summarized the theme. The 1960s are the point of departure for the trilateral analysis. Samuel Huntington, author of the chapter on the United States, described this period as a decade of democratic surge and a reassertion of democratic egalitarianism. Oh, shit, we got some footnotes. Samuel Huntington is a Harvard professor who has had a role in confronting crisis of democracy before. He was the architect of the program of forced urbanization through bombing, burning, and strafing rural areas. Look at that, like what they doing now. They burning up the rural areas to make the people move into the city for them 15-minute smart cities. You can't make this up. Designed to undercut the support base for liberation forces during the Vietnam War. He resigned his post on National Security Council in August 1978 to become director of Harvard Center for International Affairs. Huntington's resignation, he told the journalist Jim Hoagland, coming here on a campus campaign, on a campus shuttle that helped spawn Vietnam. Huntington was an acknowledged expert on military forces, structure, and warfare. He leads an outspoken advocate of economic diplomacy to force the Russia to behave themselves. Following Huntington's recommendations, the National Security Council has been brought into the process of reviewing applications for sale of technology to Russia. Hey, Anton, how you doing? Hey, Coco, how y'all doing? Damn, you can't make this up. What must follow, as trilateralists see it, is the reassertion of elite rule and decades of public apathy. Oh my God, that's same shit today. Thus, domestic items on trilateral agenda include reducing the expectations of the poor and middle class. Wow. Wow. Reducing. Their agenda include reducing the expectations of the poor and middle class. You can't make this up. You can't make it up. Increasing presidential authority. Trump. Oh my God. Strengthening business government cooperation and economic planning. Stricter press self-regulation and government oversight and pacification of rank and file labor. Wow. Below, we will review key themes in the trilateral diagnosis and prescription for the crisis of democracy when the spirit of protest, the spirit of equity, the impulse to expose inequities were abroad in the land. Diagnosis. Truman had been able to govern the country with the cooperation of a relatively small number of Wall Street lawyers and bankers. We got another asterisk. More explicitly, the report states, the extent of the United States was governed by anyone during the decades after World War II. It was governed by presidential acting with support and cooperation of key individuals and groups in the executive office, the federal bureaucracy, Congress, and more important, business, banks, law firms, foundations, and media, which constitute the private establishment. That's why they all report the same thing. Private. Huntington concludes this was no longer possible by the late 1960s. Why not? Presidential authority was eroded. There was a broad reappraisal of governmental action and morality in the post-Vietnam, post-Watergate among political leaders who, like the general public, openly questions the legitimacy of the hierarchy, coercion, discipline, secrecy, and deception, all of which are in some measure, according to Huntington, inescapable attributes of the process of government. Congressional power became more decentralized and party allegiance to the administration weakened. Traditional forms of public and private authority was undermined as people no longer felt the same compulsion to obey those whom they had previously considered superior to themselves in age, rank, status, expertise, character, or talents, just like today. Wow, I'm going to end that there. All right. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, please. Hit the like button.